Hi, everybody. I'm Nina Boski, one of the producers of Marilyn Behind the Icon. I have the privilege and the honor of being able to introduce our actress that is playing Marilyn Monroe. Her name is Erin Gavin, and what a talent she is. And before I have her say anything, I'm just going to give you a little tidbit on how talented she is. So, Erin, welcome to the show, or welcome to this segment. But I'd also like you to just give the audience a taste of your everyday language so they can get what your original dialect is.
Oh, okay. So, well, let me just pick a line that Marilyn is famous for. Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Okay. All right. So let's do it in the Marylandish kind of way that you would do it.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, and the reason being I say that is because I had a chance to meet Erin when she was actually playing Marilyn Monroe on stage in West Hollywood. Remember at what was the theater that we had that you were playing Marilyn at? What was it called?
So the first play that you came to see was Marilyn, My Secret, and it was in the Macha Theatre in West Hollywood.
Oh, that's what it is. Yep. Yeah. And, you know, so here I am. She's sounding so much like Marilyn Monroe. And then I go after the show and I go up to her and I introduce myself. And she just starts out in this Scottish accent that I'm like, wait a minute here. This is the same person. And it's really, it's wonderful to get a chance to know you and for really the audience to get to know you, because I have to say, playing Marilyn Monroe and knowing how many people that we had to try to find to play Norma Jean, the young Norma Jean, I certainly know how hard this role is for any actress, but you have the ability to kind of create that sense of her essence that I think is probably more important than just getting the voice right or getting the tone right or getting the walk right. Why did you want to play Marilyn? What made you attracted to the Marilyn role? Because this is not your first role that you've been playing Marilyn.
Oh, so well, this is a good story. Basically, I'll tell you the truth, that I didn't really know much about Marilyn at all. And I had an audition. I was almost ready to give up, to be honest, in LA. And the story goes, well, the night before the casting, I was walking across the street and I was coming out of Earth Cafe on Melrose in LA. Everybody knows that if you're in LA. And unfortunately, I got hit by a car. So I ended up in Cedars-Sinai Hospital. I fractured my hip and I missed the casting. So obviously, you know, it was a bit of a downward spiral for me at that time. But for whatever reason, 3 weeks in, I'd missed the casting, obviously, and I felt like, you know what, I'm just so not ready to give up, but I feel, you know, sad and whatnot, but there was something in me that just said, no, I'm going to contact the casting director and tell them what happened. So I did, and I actually got a reply from the director and the casting director and said, you know, when you're better, can you come in? So in the meantime, he said, can you send us a tape of you singing Happy Birthday, Mr. President? So actually I did. And they said, okay, come in as soon as you can. So it was about a week later, I hobbled in and I read some scenes with the gent who was playing Bobby Kennedy, and who, you know, was fantastic. And then after about 30 minutes of doing songs and rehearsals, they said, okay, when can you start? And I was shocked because, you know, here I am, like,
ready to give up.
And, you know, I just couldn't believe it. I was ready to give up. Like, honestly, I was ready to move back to Bonnie, Scotland and just call it a day. But that little thing in me was just so determined, just not yet, not yet. And so it was like music to my ears to hear that. And they had already casted Marilyn, and they then said, we're going to double the role because we just feel that you have that essence, that vulnerability that she had, so we want you. So that's really what happened.
And how it all happened. Wow.
And then what happened was I was standing on stage and I was rehearsing myself into this black hole. You know, when you're on stage, you have all these lights and it's just a black hole. And I was in the theatre myself, and because I wanted to rehearse as much as I could. And I stood there and I thought, oh my gosh, I remembered when I was 7 years old, flashback, that my dad had bought me, it was one of the first things he ever bought me, was a full-size picture of Marilyn Monroe from the famous scene where she's standing over the subway grating in 7 Year Itch and the skirt's blowing up, and I was doing that scene. Like, I was literally on stage rehearsing that scene, and it just took me back. It just was like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be here for some reason. I don't know why, but like, it all just, the jigsaw puzzle just fell into place, and I felt like peace with it and calm. And I remember when I was 7, like, I loved all the old black and white movies, and my favorite movie was Some Like It Hot. But even though I didn't know much about Marilyn, what I did know, I was like, wow, this woman is so glamorous and she just seems just lovely. And oh wow, one day I would like to be an actress just like her.
Oh wow. And you know, it's so interesting too, because the role that you're playing right now in our Marilyn Behind the Icon, how does that differ from other roles that you've played with her? Because there's some really intense scenes, especially in this first season.
Yes, what I loved about this particular script was you guys have captured really who she is off screen and on screen. And with plays, a lot of them, it's mainly her essence on screen, because that's how people remember her, how they know her. Obviously the fans who really know a lot about her are no different, but the one thing I really first read was that, wow, I love the fact that you guys have really captured her. So I knew that Gary, who's obviously had written the script, and Randall had really captured and really knew who she was. And what I also loved was the fact that as an actress, you can really add colour to the performance, because she's up and down and she's really vulnerable and different moods. And yes, the plays and yes, the movies and documentaries that I've done have captured that also, but you guys went much deeper, because we can. It's
because we can. Yes, you know, you're not on the mercy of, we got to just just come at it for the sizzle and not really the truth around Marilyn. What do you personally want people to get out of this series?
I want, like every performance, you want people to feel the emotion. And my job is to make sure to entertain, you know. And my job is to entertain, and that includes feeling that emotion that I'm portraying. So I feel like if that's what comes out of it for the audience that's watching it, then I've done my job.
So Erin, there's a wonderful scene in episode 6, and it's at the very end of the episode where you are actually, it's a real scene that happened with you and Clark Gable. And I have to say, when I first listened to the scene, I thought for a moment I was listening to Marilyn Monroe and Clark Gable for real. That's how good the scene was.
Thanks.
It really was. So let me ask you this one last question. If Marilyn were to be listening to this podcast, what do you think she would say? Or what do you think she'd feel?
She'd definitely feel emotional. I mean, you're looking back on your own life, aren't you? But I think she would feel that we hopefully did a great job on it. because the writers and obviously the full team really did a lot of research on this. And so I feel like she would feel like we did her proud. I feel there's a lot of emotion, a lot of color, and I think we nailed it. One hopes.
Well, I'm going to end this interview with a wonderful thing that Marilyn would say to people and to herself, is to hold a good thought for Marilyn. Let's hold a good thought for Erin, and let's hold a good thought for this podcast.